was yesterday as it was happening, and we start Fox and Friends with the Fox News Alert. Absolute horror inside a Florida high school as an expelled former student unleashed a killing spree. At least 17 people are dead. More than a dozen others hurt and in the hospital.
Moments ago, the shooter let out of the Broward County Sheriff's Department on his way to jail.
Yeah, that's what makes this different. He is alive. Our own Todd Pyro is in Portland, Florida, with some breaking news on the investigation. Hey, Todd.
Hey, Steve. Hey, Ainsley. Hey, Brian. Overnight, we learned brand new information about the killer as the investigation continues at the scene here behind me of yesterday's carnage, and also at a mobile home park that's about 30 minutes away from where we are standing right now. There, a massive police presence was reported overnight, sources saying it is in connection with the shooting. A neighbor in the area said police told him it was some kind of explosive at one of the homes. As for yesterday's nightmare, the pictures from inside the school, terrifying. Students trying to find cover under desks, shaking and crying, not knowing what's about to happen. The gunman mercilessly killing at least 17 innocent victims, setting off fire alarms, and then shooting those fleeing with an AR-15. Reports of him wearing a gas mask and having smoke bombs on him during his carnage, then trying to sneak out in the fleeing crowd before being arrested in a nearby neighborhood.
Good thing the door was locked. The shooter shot through the door, poked in, shot a couple people next to me. I was sitting right behind a cabinet and the bullet passed my ear, got a girl next to me.
And with each passing hour, a picture of 19-year-old Nikolas Cruz becomes clearer. His adoptive mother died this past November, and he was living with a friend's family. Cruz was expelled from school for disciplinary reasons. One student said it was for fighting with his ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend, and that Cruz had been abusive to the girl. On social media, Cruz is seen with pictures of guns and knives, bragging about shooting animals. The Broward County Sheriff calling the post very disturbing. And many people described him as, quote, obsessed with guns. A former neighbor said police were called to his home multiple times, and he was seen shooting at a neighbor's chickens. Words like sketchy, weird, off, strange, troubled, and super stressed out all the time used by multiple students to describe the killer. One student even told local media that, quote, everyone predicted the shooting, with kids even joking before yesterday that one day he would shoot up the school.
He was like shy, like with his lunch bag, but like he wouldn't talk a lot.
What was your take on it?
I mean, he was like that weird kid at school that you see, like walk around the school.
Described as a loner?
Yeah, like a loner.
The FBI is now asking anyone with any pictures from outside or inside the school from yesterday to please get them to them as soon as possible so they can piece everything together in their investigation. All while the major question remains, if all these signs were known, Steve, Ainsley, and Brian, then why couldn't this be stopped?
That's exactly right. All right, Todd, thank you very much for joining us from Parkland, Florida. In addition to some of the kids saying, you know, if anything bad ever happened here, we knew it would be him, there apparently was a teacher at this particular high school as well who ID'd him as a potential threat to classmates last year. That's why he was not allowed on campus with a backpack. If there's somebody you're not going to let on with a backpack, there's a good reason not to let him on at all.
Well, something that also shocked me, one of the students said he liked to kill animals, little animals like frogs. They said he was a racist and that he had a crazy mind. That according to one student. Another student said he did anything crazy for a laugh, but he was trouble, that student said.
Right. This is not one of those things where you're going to hear people say it's a bit of a surprise. He seemed totally normal. Almost nobody that interacted with this Nikolas Cruz thought he was normal. Classmates said also after he was expelled that he was fighting a lot. And if you can't carry a backpack, also you have to wonder what he was doing on campus. And then also the motive of trying to survive. Afterwards, he walks out with the kids, and he's picked up a mile later, first spotted, I believe, by a chopper and surrounded and does seem to be taken away without incident. One of the students talked about him, the shooter that he knew.
How did you know about his guns?
He showed me personally through his phone and stuff like that. I stayed clear of him most of the time during my time in an alternate school, I didn't want to be with him at all because I felt as though like I didn't want to cause any conflict with him because that's the impression he gave off.
That was happening live. That child or that teenager was interviewed by a reporter there on the scene. This kid who is responsible for this allegedly
right there in the burgundy
maroon,
shirt.
right. He was adopted at birth by an older couple, and his adoptive father died 13 years ago. His adoptive mother died 3.5 months ago in November.
Right, and some people said, well, you know, he was depressed at the time, but then again, his mother died 3.5 months ago on November 1st. You would be depressed as well. There you can see with some of the kids running out. Pam Bondi, who's the Attorney General from Florida, says, look, when you see warning signs, tell somebody. Tell the police.
When they're posting it on social media, they have followers. So kids who are out there, parents, you've got to monitor this stuff. And if you see it, take everything seriously. Take every threat seriously and report it to law enforcement. We would rather you do that and be wrong 99% of the time than have anything happen in this world. And these teens now are vocal on social media. They don't just pop up from anywhere. There are warning signs.
Everything she said makes sense, but it also looks like people notice this. I mean, according to one report, somebody who sat next to him during school said, you know, I've been kicked out of 2 other schools, he told them. He would later be prior schools, and then he would later be kicked out of this one. And then you have a relative on Long Island where his adopted parents lived 20 years ago before they took him as infants over to Florida, said they believe he was on medication. And his brother said that his half-brother reportedly said, I could always hear him loading and unloading the gun all night.
Yeah. Well, if you look at his Instagram post, which has since been taken down, and we've decided as a news channel not to show you because they're very graphic, but they're pictures of his face covered up. He's holding up a gun in front of his face, and it's covered. And the captions are really sick. One says, pistol fun is blank. Then he has a picture with these 3 knives that look extremely scary, these knives that are huge. And he says mother blanking knives, he goes on to say. Then he has a bullseye, and at the bottom of the bullseye, and the bullseye is shot right in the middle, right in the target. And at the bottom it says group therapy. And then he writes at the bottom of that picture, it really does blanking work. Give it a try.
There you can see him being restrained before he was taken to the sheriff's office. But he's put on a gurney because apparently he was reporting a racing heart, as you would well imagine. What's interesting about all those images, though, is he's wearing that burgundy or purple shirt. That's actually a junior ROTC polo shirt that he's wearing, not wearing it in that image right there. Nonetheless, it does look as if there were some warning signs. Did they rise to the level of being really concerned? Or is this simply something regarding mental illness, which we have heard in the past? Here's the sheriff of Broward County, Florida.
If a person is predisposed to commit such a horrific event, like go into a school and shoot people, there's not anybody or not a lot law enforcement could do about it or any entity could do about it. The only things we can do are train very hard. We have to be able to mitigate. We have to be able to respond quickly so we can lessen the loss of lives. I've said this time and time again, you know, if we tear a knee up, we go to an orthopedic surgeon. If we have mental health issues, we need to be treated. But while people who are the victim of mental health illnesses in this country are being treated, in the opinion of this sheriff, they should not be able to buy, surround themselves, purchase, or carry a handgun.
Wow. So there's so many stories that are going to come out from what happened behind the scenes, where people went because they had a fire drill in the morning. They did have somewhat of a plan should this happen, but the enormity of the school with over 3,000 students, 15 minutes before the final bell, you wonder how you could possibly be organized. They said it was definitely hindered by the fact that people just ran. A lot of them left their backpacks out and made them very hard to secure the scene. There's another story out there that showed a football coach who worked as a security guard there and actually graduated in 1999. We have some sad news about him.
Coach Aaron Fies is his name. He was employed as a security guard, graduated from that high school in '99, and in 2002 was hired as the head coach of the JV football team. And we have gotten word this morning that he has passed away.
Evidently, he shielded students from gunfire.
Jumped in front of them.
He's one of the people who, you know, At 2:40 yesterday, when the staff heard the gunshots, they went into code red lockdown. And what you do is you lock your door. You lock the door that the students are in the classrooms. You lock it so they can't get in, presumably. But keep in mind, this guy reportedly rang the fire alarm. What happens? All the doors open, and all those kids are out there. Listen to some of the children remembering what happened.
She shot through my door. 3 in my classroom got hurt. I just saw blood everywhere.
I actually heard the gunshots. I heard at least 4, like, boom, 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 boom.
People were running and screaming and pushing.
Hid in the tennis courts. Then we went to the locker room. We were in there for about 2.5 to 3 hours.
There was dead bodies everywhere.
And it's Valentine's Day, so this shouldn't even be happening.
We thought it was a fire drill, but we heard the shots beforehand. And I'm guessing he wanted everybody to come out.
One of my friends died, and it hasn't hit me yet.
In the hallway, saw a big pile of blood, like kind of smeared as if they were dragged away.
I was praying to God, thinking that He could save us all and that we could make it out alive.
This is unbelievable. It's the 3rd shooting this year, the deadliest since 2012. And the Washington Post put this together. They said, beginning with Columbine 19 years ago, more than 150,000 students attending at 170 primary or secondary schools have experienced a shooting on campus.
You know, kids, you look at that video, some of them look so young. Think about your freshman year in high school, how young you were. And these kids are experiencing this and seeing people, their friends, slaughtered in a classroom. 17 families are without their kids this morning, waking up the worst nightmare ever imaginable. Parents spend their whole lives raising these kids, trying to work really hard to give their kids a great life. And in one instance, this guy, this evil, evil person goes in and takes that away from all of these families.
President Trump tweeted yesterday, "My prayers and condolences to the families of the victims of the terrible Florida shooting. No child, teacher, or anyone else should ever feel unsafe in an American school."
And I don't know if these security guys were armed or not, but that is key. I know on Long Island, in my school in particular, almost everybody are ex-cops or detectives, and they are allowed to carry a gun until they get to the high school, and they aren't supposed to guard a high school, junior high school, or a grammar school without a gun that they spent their whole careers qualifying to own. So I don't understand that logic.
There's a lot not to understand, Brian. We don't know whether or not any gun laws were broken. It sounds like he bought the gun legally. Were warning signs missed? Was this a mental health issue? What about the social media images of the guns and the animals? The breakdown of the family. His mother died a couple of months ago. His real mom died decades ago. Nobody told anybody anything. Something is not working. And as we get up on this Thursday morning, just think about what that guy did.
He was living in a trailer park with another kid. 13 minutes now after the hour. Next, we dig into the history of this Florida high school shooter. Could anything have been done to stop him? Were there warning signs? Did people actually do something, and were they ignored?
The former Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis led the hunt for the Boston bomber, and he's going to weigh in on this next.
Began to dissect his websites and the things that social media that he was on, and some of the things that have come to mind are very, very disturbing.
This morning, new details about the troubled teenager accused in the deadly school shooting in Florida.
Named Nikolas Cruz, he was deemed enough of a threat that officials were warned about ever allowing him on campus. Get this. With a backpack, they would eventually expel him from the school.
Fox News contributor Ed Davis is the former chief of the Boston Police Department. He joins us right now from Boston. Mr. Commissioner, if somebody is not allowed on a campus with a backpack, there's a problem.
No question about that. There are incredible issues here where this man was telegraphing his intent to do this. Some of the students who have been interviewed on camera say that he actually threatened to shoot up the school. That's a crime. It should be recognized as that and reported, and then people can take the right action to try to eliminate this threat. You need to take these things seriously, and unfortunately, this one fell through the cracks.
Commissioner, You know, we keep hearing, Pam Bondi was saying, if you see signs of this, people are following him on Instagram. If you see these horrific pictures he's posting, contact police. If this happens, and we do contact police because we see the warning signs, what exactly can you do? Because at this point, the kid hadn't done anything wrong.
Well, first of all, social media is a very important tool that police can use. There's a lot of people that say we shouldn't be looking at it, but in this day and age, that's like saying we shouldn't be reading the newspaper. Police should have software that flags these postings, and this software exists right now. We use it in my business, but unfortunately, police are having trouble getting it because of privacy issues. There are tools that can be put in place that will augment the need to see something, say something, so that we can close these loops before they turn into these terrible tragedies.
And by the way, if you're seeing this video for the first time, you're saying it just happened. So we're watching it with you for the first time, not this, but the previous video of the shooter being walked through of the police officer.
He was being transferred from the sheriff's department to the police department.
But the good news about that is that he was questioned extensively last night. They might get some ideas that will help us in the future on these issues.
So if I'm going to do a background check, I want to tell this 19-year-old wants an AR-15. He doesn't seem to have any arrest record. Let's say that is indeed the case. But if you listen to the half-brother or a relative, he's on some type of medication. And if you go on his social media site, does he look like a threat? Does that pop up on the background check?
This is very personal to me. It does not. I issued a gun permit to a man who had severe psychological issues, who was under significant treatment by psychiatrists, and he used that gun to kill people. So right now our system is broken. We need to connect the mental health issues to the licensing people.
You're right. Something just isn't working right. Commissioner, thank you very much for joining us today from Boston.
Thanks, Commissioner. We don't even know why he did it, but Democrats are already saying that gun control should have stopped that high school shooter. Do you think that's true? Let us know. Our law enforcement panel is going to debate that coming up next.
Florida Senator Marco Rubio warning people not to jump to conclusions about what happened in the school shooting before knowing all the facts.
Who this person is, what motivated them, how did they get a hold of the weapon that they used for this attack. I think it's important to know all of that before you jump to conclusions that there's some law that we could have passed that could have prevented it. And there may be, but shouldn't we at least know the facts?
Shouldn't we at least know the facts? Here to weigh in our law enforcement panel, we've got former New York City Police Department Lieutenant Dr. Darren Porcher, screen left, along with former Police Intel Officer Buck Sexton in the middle, and former New York City Police Department investigator Lou Palumbo. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Does anybody here in this panel think more gun laws would have stopped this?
No, it's a far more multifaceted issue than just gun control. Gun control traditionally is an anesthetic that's introduced by the left, so to speak. But we have to take in consideration socioeconomics, public health, and education. The triangulation of those three components are really key to this. We also have to look at the historical timeline and what happened in that particular school district. This is somewhat of an affluent community. So the issues there, or I want to say the fortifications that would be put in place in this place in Florida will be very different than what we were putting in place in a place like New York City.
Yeah, but Buck, the problem is you can teach everybody, if somebody starts shooting, lock yourselves in the classroom, but then when somebody pulls the fire alarm, everybody's out in the hall and you're a sitting duck.
The security procedures are often going to be a casualty mitigation function, meaning once one of these things gets started, the protocols you have in place will hopefully limit the casualties you have. But if somebody gets on the school grounds with a semi-automatic rifle and they're trying to kill as many people as possible, clearly there's no perfect security that you could put in place that would stop that from happening at that point. On the gun control issue, until we know if in fact the law here is broken, we can't even begin to look at what would be a possible change. There's no loophole to address. And I have to say, when you look at some of the other major shootings, you're talking about legally owned guns or guns that were stolen from a legal gun owner. There are plenty of ways that you could look at this and say there's literally no law that you could even conjure up that would have stopped this based on gun control.
There's a bigger issue here, and it is tangential to gun control, and it deals with mental illness. The interesting part is the three of us, and I just want to correct you guys, I'm retired from Nassau County Police Department. We all came from the law enforcement community, and part of our vetting process was psychological screening. Minnesota Multiphasic Screening, Rorschach Word Association, interviews with psychologists and psychiatrists. We have changed as a culture. I am a stout supporter of the Second Amendment, but I'm also a stout supporter of change. And we need to put in a mechanism that no longer allows individuals who are mentally or emotionally defective from obtaining these firearms. So a lot of what we're talking about today, we're going to talk about again in the future, because this isn't the last of these incidents.
The big question is, where do you draw the line? For instance, there were some children at that class in the school yesterday who said, you know, we always joke that if anybody came on campus, it would be that guy. But then again, he was working at a dollar store, and ABC went and talked to the people at the dollar store. They said he was loyal, he was trustworthy, he would show up for his job a half an hour before the shift started. He was a dream employee. So
all senses,
how do you figure it out?
All senses lead to this person being a sociopath. When we look at his mutilation of animals, propensity for gun violence, things to that effect. And so in some way, shape, or form, we should have highlighted this information to law enforcement. Oftentimes, when we look at the school community, it's in two components.
Okay, so the social media stuff, though, who does that? I mean, is it friends of the kid who narc on him, or is it the actual social media company?
I hope that there are people around the individual that see this, because you can't rely on administrators or law enforcement officers to be the first line of understanding when someone's social media presence has crossed over. There's obviously a lot of people on social media. The issue then becomes, what do you do with somebody who has not actually broken the law, although I do believe some of his social media posts did in fact pose a threat. But if somebody has not broken the law, to try to commit them to a mental institution against their will without breaking the law, very difficult to do, and with good reason.
Well, most schools have what we refer to as either a resource officer or a police officer.
Right.
And so that law enforcement or that security expert or analyst should have been a person that should have been able to troubleshoot this individual.
One of the problems is that this young man is not an anomaly in our culture. There are thousands of these children who are quite disenfranchised across the country. If the expectation is for law enforcement or school teachers, for example, to start to intercede on every type of case like this where there's a flag of some type of behavior that doesn't seem to be in synchronization with school, that's an unreasonable expectation. I think we need to focus on how we're going to fix this going forward, because if we don't, we're going to be back here in a week or a month and talking about this again. You know, we can speak about putting armed security people in academic environments, hardening these environments.
You can't turn it into a fort.
Well, you know what's sad is you have to look at this culture and how we're deteriorating and how we need to address that part of this.
Well, something simply is not working. Guys, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Steve.
All right. Well, we've been talking about this. Can school shootings ever be prevented? The judge said yes. How? Arm the teachers. He's going to join us live next.
All I heard was the gunshots.
I just saw blood everywhere.
This is just absolutely pure evil.
I don't want this to be another mass shooting. I don't want this just to be something that people forget.
All right, we're back with the Fox News Alert, and it's not a good one. A football coach, now the first victim identified in that horrific school shooting in Florida yesterday, Erin Faz. She shielded kids, reportedly, from gunfire. Phase, I should say, from gunfire as the shooter gunned down students. He struggled for his life, we think, for hours.
Heartbreak spreading throughout the community. That was just one of that city. Parkland just named one of Florida's safest cities, believe it or not.
Caroline Shively following this story closely for us. She is live down in Parkland, Florida with the very latest on the victims. Caroline?
Good morning to you guys. The numbers are absolutely staggering. 17 dead, 15 more injured, and hundreds upon hundreds of students who were in that classroom, in that school, are traumatized this morning. Just think of what they lived through. We're seeing that through some of their postings on social media. They flipped over desks. They hid in closets. They listened to that gunfire as Nikolas Cruz, the accused gunman in this case, first shot outside the school, then shot his way into the school, pulling the fire alarm, causing them to pour out of those classrooms before they realized what was happening, listening to the gunfire, not knowing if they would make it through the day. Here's what some of the victims said yesterday.
And all I heard was the gunshots. And then when we went outside and the police cleared us for us to go outside, I see dead bodies on the floor.
I know that 3 people, I think about 3 in my classroom got hurt. I just saw blood everywhere.
And there was a lot of blood everywhere. Leaving the hallway, looking on the floor, seeing blood and just like kids.
And counselors will be provided for those students and staffers affected in the shooting that will be going on today and tomorrow, and as long as it is needed. Back to you guys.
All right, Caroline Shively live in Parkland. Thank you very much. Judge Andrew Napolitano joins us right now, Fox News senior judicial analyst. So we just saw this guy being transferred from the sheriff to the police. What happens next?
Well, they'll decide to try him as an adult. He is an adult, and they'll probably seek the death penalty. That's a long way from now. His lawyers will probably challenge whether he is death penalty eligible, either because of his age or because of his mental status. A judge will make that decision. Then there'll be a traditional old-fashioned jury trial. Did he do it? And then the second phase of the trial, death penalty. If he pleads guilty, he still is entitled to a jury trial on the issue of death. Judges in America cannot condemn people to death. Only juries can. So that's a funny little quirk in the law. It's hard to predict how this is going to play out. But he clearly is an adult biologically, and he clearly committed a crime that is worthy of death penalty. Say again?
He appears stable, mentally stable.
Well, I mean, the appearances are sometimes deceiving. We don't know. You know, the president said last night it's a mental health issue. Mental health is a broad array of behavioral patterns, and we have to put our finger on this one is, but we can't just say, oh, he's crazy, and therefore he shouldn't be punished. Obviously, there has to be the severest punishment we know for this. But the more important thing is, this is not a time in tragedy to be re-debating the Second Amendment. I mean, the right to keep and bear arms is as natural a right as the right to speak and the right to worship, or the right not to worship. My suggestion is the Israeli model. Not all the teachers are armed, but all the teachers. The culture is different. I know that. All the teachers have been in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. Every adult, except for certain religious groups, spends time there, and in that time period they are trained. And select teachers quietly, not ostentatiously, are armed and quietly trained. You can't just carry a gun. You have to practice with it every week.
Like the pilot program on airlines.
Correct. And guess how many of these school shootings they have in Israel?
Right.
Zero.
Judge, we're all for, I at least am all for less government. But when you see this shooting in Las Vegas, Sandy Hook, where all the kids were killed, this shooting, the shooter was using an AR-15 in all three of those cases, correct? Is that right?
Yes, it's a very powerful weapon. It's I know this weapon. It's the civilian version of an M16.
Right.
It's very, very powerful. But you can stop a person with an AR-16 with a slingshot if you know how to use it.
Sure.
Just takes what. All these tragedies end the same way, when the police arrive and shoot back or threaten to shoot back at the killer. This threatening to shoot back or shooting back should happen. Sorry, I put my finger in your face, Brian. Should happen sooner rather than later.
I understand, Judge. The other thing is, oh, well, he passed a background check and he got the gun legally. All right, fine. Well, now if we find out, and I'm not doing to besmirch anyone on psychotropic drugs, but let's say he had some issues where he was taking, as one relative said, he was taking some drugs. Let's say he has these postings that show a disturbing proclivity towards violence. Should he pass a background check?
The current background checks do not show what drugs you're taking. They show, I'm familiar with the background checks. There's a main database that the FBI keeps that the states, through their licensed gun dealers, tap into. Does not show the drugs you're taking.
What about your social media?
It does not show social media.
Well, that's a problem.
Right. It shows violence. It shows law enforcement. Have you ever been involved in law enforcement? Have you ever had a divorce? It shows just basic information about them. Have you ever been arrested? You ever been arrested for a violent crime? That's the type of information that's on it.
Can this all be changed?
Yes. Yes, it can be. It can be changed.
How is that
I'm sorry to
possible?
say, because I don't like more government, but that is a federal issue because the feds maintain this database.
Well, there's a reason it happens in this country and it doesn't happen in other countries. What is that reason?
Because where there's more freedom, there's more violence. I'm sorry to say that. It's a price that we pay for living in an open society.
But Judge, it's not working.
Right.
It's not working. It's not working right, but it would have worked had there been some teachers in that school armed as if this were Jerusalem rather than Florida.
And you know what, Judge? And also the theory is, since he isn't stupid, because he did think this out, evidently, you would think that he's not going to go for a hard target.
Right.
That's Sandy Hook. They go for a soft target.
It's like shooting.
It's a repellent.
It's shooting fish in a barrel. The last thing he wants is to be shot at.
Right.
That's the first thing that should happen. To him.
Judge, thanks so much. Meanwhile, we're going to turn to another major story, and that's politics on Capitol Hill. Well, we were obsessed with what was happening in Florida. There's a lot going on as we crunch a deal for DACA.
Apparently, a group of 22 senators finally coming to some sort of bipartisan agreement offering legal status and a path to citizenship for the Dreamers, along with some funding for the border wall.
Griff Jenkins is live in Washington with what is coming next. Griff?
Good morning, guys. They've still got a vote to proceed here this morning in the Senate, and there could be as many as 4 versions of a bill in the queue. But that gang of 22, that's new. Now, here's what's in this plan. Let's get right to it. First, it grants $25 billion for the wall over the next 10 years, but only $2.5 billion up front, and it has congressional oversight, which means it could be pulled at some point. It provides legal status and a path to citizenship for Dreamers, but it prohibits Dreamers from sponsoring their parents for citizenship. Finally, that diversity lottery, that remains in place for $55,000 every year. Now, Republican senators like Lindsey Graham, who's part of this gang, says our proposal would represent the most significant change to immigration law in the past 35 years. And his colleague Jeff Flake says he's pleased to be part of this group of Republicans and Democrats who are working together to make a law rather than appoint. Now, Democrat supporters, a part of this group like Senator Tim Kaine, says we've reached a deal that gives us the best chance to protect the Dreamers against deportation from the only country they know as home. But guys, here's the deal. It's not likely President Trump will go for this because it fails to meet all 4 pillars of that deal, especially on that chain migration and visa lottery, as you just saw. And it's not as conservative as the bill being offered in the House. So I'm not sure exactly how far down the road this gets us. By the way, you may want to watch for whether or not this Gang of 22 bill is the first or the 4th voted on. The sequencing of votes matters because you want your bill to go last, lest all the other 3 before it should fail, guys.
I think they're going to go with Grassley's first, right? And even if he gets over 50, he needs 60. Then in comes the other bill. And then, of course, the House weighs in. And the president will be the Toscanini of this. He'll decide if this is going to orchestrate towards a flourish or a demise.
Well, if they don't have his 4 points, he's going to say, nope, not going to do it. Griff,
maybe.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And don't forget, a tweet from the president could sink this anytime today.
Just like that. All right.
The president tweets?
Thank you.
Thanks, Griff. All right, back to our big story this morning. Democrats are now calling for gun control after that horrific high school shooting. But should they really be pushing for other answers, like why were the warning signs missed? Lawrence Jones on that next.